Hi class, in today's video we're going to talk about blues and gospel music, and this is kind of flown straight from jazz. There's lots of things that are in common and similarity between these styles, as they all kind of developed about the same time period and from some of the same sources. So we're going to be looking at blues and comparing them to the different styles and connecting it to those 12-bar blues that we talked about, and how does blues compare? So blues music, like jazz, has its roots in African American traditions, but it also includes some Western guitar playing. So jazz just mostly includes European traditions, but blues takes it a step further and includes that guitar style. It's an extremely emotional type of music, very an emotional outlet, and it's specifically evolved to express feelings of anguish due to slavery and post-slavery conditions. It emerged between about 1870 and 1900. It's a little fuzzy in that area because we didn't have very many recordings. And it was, in the beginning, very much a solo style. So a single individual person playing their instrument and or singing was how blues got started. And it used pitch alterations to change the characteristics of the music. So instead of singing right on the pitch, you'd sing a little bit above or a little bit below, just slightly out of tune, to even create more feelings of anguish, because your ear doesn't like that sound. It doesn't like it when it's not on pitch. So it really furthered that feeling of anguish. So tell me, a music style evolving from the spirituals, field hollers, shouts, and chants of African slaves, and expressing sadness, ordeal, and longing, characterized by the repetition of a specific 12-bar chord progression. Is this blues or jazz? What's the video about, guys? So we can't talk about blues without talking about slavery. So blues is a direct response to slavery. It described the suffering that occurred during slavery and in post-slavery conditions. Slave owners would try to take away the cultural identity of these slaves, and they did their best to hang on to what they could, and they did that through music by combining some of the styles that they had from their own cultures. We didn't get the Emancipation Proclamation until January 1st, 1863, but it wasn't until later on that the slaves actually knew that they were emancipated, and that's why we celebrate Juneteenth, to celebrate when the slaves actually found out when they were emancipated. There was a lot of stuff happening during this time period that not the best, and this is one of them, but we have to talk about it because there's a lot of things that came from this, and this is minstrel shows. So in a minstrel show, a white performer would dress up in blackface and sing, act, or dance in mimicry of the style of African Americans. Not our best moment as a American culture, but it happened, so we're going to talk about it. And they would travel across the country, sharing their act with people all over the country and spreading blues music and jazz and gospel, different styles from African Americans. And they performed all these very typical styles. And I'm not going to say what they performed was typical, because it was a caricature version of the actual music that African Americans were singing. So characterized, meaning it was like very cartoony. It wasn't what the music was actually intended to be. It was a stage act. These shows were extremely racist, very prejudiced, and they also introduced the music of Africa, but they introduced this music to the world and made it more mainstream. So they kind of set the stage for acceptance, even though they were doing it in a very racist manner. They kind of set the stage for acceptance of these different styles of music. It really later created a fascination with blues music across the country. So let's talk about the difference between the words rural and urban. So rural, typically you're thinking farm, country, kind of out there. And then urban, you're thinking city life, high concentration of people. Blues was originally categorized as being a rural or country style of music. So this is something that you would see out in the country, single person with a guitar singing the blues. Then we get also Mississippi Delta area blues, this little place right here, this little birthplace of blues, where they incorporated harmonica, guitar. Musicians would travel from city to city looking for work, and they were taking their music with them. But then it travels up to Chicago, and this is where we get a different style. So we add some urban flair to it. Urban meaning more people are incorporating to this style. And this really developed as a result of these poor Black workers going north looking for jobs. In the cities, they have found electric guitars, drums, piano, bass guitar, and added even amplified harmonica from some of their experiences in the cities. And it even traveled again to Detroit, and it's very similar to Chicago blues, but it added more of those electric amplified instruments. So it just kind of gradually moved and evolved where it went. So some musicians of the time, important people, we get W.C. Handy, considered the father of the blues, kind of that Memphis style is what we think of. Blind Lemon Jefferson, considered the greatest blues singer of the 20s, and he was blind from a very young age, but you don't need to see to participate in music and to sing and to perform and to share your soul. We get Pine Top Smith, the originator of the Boogie Woogie. Willie Dixon, he was unique because he could read music. Think about this. We're talking about late 1800s, early 1900s, post-emancipation. A lot of these African Americans could not read due to where they came from. They weren't teaching slaves how to read. So they're living in this weird limbo where they couldn't read. So they didn't know how to read music either. So he was different because he could read music. We get Ma Rainey, who's considered the mother of the blues and one of the first professional blues singers. We get Muddy Waters, who's famous for his guitar playing and his guitar riffs. And Stevie Ray Vaughan, later in the 1950s, he's from Texas, and he won a Grammy for his music. So how do they make a living? So blues musicians, we talked about this, a lot of times they're poor workers who are traveling, looking for work. Even though mainstream America loved their music, they didn't get a lot of the recognition because this is just how the world worked. So they weren't paid royalties. So royalties means every time somebody purchases your written sheet music or purchases your recording, you get kickback from that. You get paid every single time. But they got a flat rate. So when they went to sign a contract, they said, here's my song. And they're like, okay, we're going to give you a flat rate, this much money to have all the rights to your song. And so they, other than performing it individually, they didn't make money off that music ever again. So instead of getting this constant flow of music, earning off their music, that was it. It was just one and done. And a lot of this was due to the fact that they were poor traveling workers. They didn't have an address for them to send the money to. So for them, it was easier to give them a flat rate and send them on their way because they couldn't necessarily send them the money. And like I said, these royalties are determined by overall sales. They could have been paid a whole lot more money had they been able to receive royalties. And this kind of has continued into the music industry today, where musicians, specifically African-American musicians, are not paid what they deserve. Either they're given a flat rate, somebody else takes credit for their music, or they're just underpaid for their contributions. Even though we're looking historically, their music is the foundation for most of the popular styles we like to listen to today. We talked about this in our last unit. We're going to talk about it again because it's the basis of blues. Is the 12-bar blues, uses measures with 4 beats, so the 4/4 time signature, and there's a total of 12 measures per cycle. Also very important is that call and response. So the leader either sings or plays an instrument and the group responds back. And this conversation, and blues also engaged in that conversation. And it was a good way to share ideas and thoughts and feelings. So tell me, what is the most common harmonic progression for the blues? Was it 4-bar blues or 12-bar blues? So now we're going to move on to gospel music. So gospel music was a direct response to slavery. When slaves were out in the fields, they were not allowed to sing their traditional music. They could only sing Christian spirituals. So what they did is they took their own traditions, their own styles, and they put Christian themes to them. And they incorporated other styles from different European immigrants as well, wrapped it all together to create gospel music. And this was also used to communicate. Some of these spirituals were coded and they would send messages to each other. There's several songs that were used on the Underground Railroad to convey directions. So really kind of fascinating. One specific song called Follow the Drinking Gourd. The drinking gourd stood for constellations, the Big Dipper, and it would tell you, okay, so when you get here to the river, you're going to see the Big Dipper. It's going to look like this, and this is what you're going to do. And there's going to be a man waiting there for you. And so they would use this music to communicate with each other in the fields and share these messages under the guise of being Christian music. Before World War II, gospel was called spirituals, anthems, and jubilees. Post World War II, we start calling it gospel. And it includes lots of syncopation, so not falling right on the beat, lots of blue and tonality, improvisation, a lot of that call and response. It's very much a participatory type of music. We get Thomas A. Dorsey. He's the father of gospel music, and he really wanted to disassociate the style with slavery. And so this is when we started to call it gospel and not spirituals, because he wanted that separation and to bring it into the future. And he is the first African-American to start a publishing company. It's kind of fascinating little tidbit. So tell me, which artist is considered the father of gospel music, insisted that his music be called gospel music in an effort to disassociate it from slavery and assert its legitimacy? Was this Thomas A. Dorsey or Billy Preston? Another question for you. Which elements did slaves fuse with traditional Christian spirituals to create a new musical tradition? Was it African historical events or African rhythms and melodies? Some important people. We get Mahalia Jackson, and she performed at the inauguration of JFK, and she also performed at MLK's I Have a Dream speech and his funeral. Go look her up. Her music is amazing. We get the Reverend James Cleveland, known for his raspy sound, called the King of Gospel. He's the first gospel singer with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. We get Edwin Hawkins. He's kind of a bridge between this old and new school contemporary. Billy Preston, he's won 2 Grammys, performing with Mahalia Jackson, Ray Charles, the Beatles, and more. Very prolific singer. We get Kirk Franklin, and he really was influenced by other genres and kind of wanted, again, this incorporation of other styles in his bridge. So here's our little tree of gospel music. Can kind of be divided up into a couple things. Remember, we talked about spirituals were kind of the original associated with slavery. This is our first authentically American sacred music pre-World War II. In the middle, we get African-American gospel music. And this is what evolved after World War II, considered urban, more of a city style. But also, we do have another section of gospel music, and this is our white Southern gospel music, very much considered country gospel, which you'll kind of see in small town churches. And it also evolved from this, and it's a different take on gospel music. Civil rights movement. Gospel played a role in the abolition of slavery, desegregation, and the civil rights movement. Same as blues, same as jazz. We Shall Overcome. This was the anthem of the civil rights movement, and it was all about protest and hope and sharing those personal experiences. Lift Every Voice and Sing. This was the congregational record as the official African-American national anthem. And music has been used for millennia to share different political and personal views. And this really helped aid the civil rights movement, as you could spread it faster. You could spread your message faster than just saying it or writing it down. And would kind of catch in your ear and you could listen to it. Also, these musicians, they were well known, both jazz, blues, gospel, and so they became the faces of these movements. They were more approachable because people already knew them. So tell me, how did blues and gospel music play a role in the civil rights movement? So tell me in 1-2 sentences, how did blues and gospel music play a role in the civil rights movement? All right, guys, end of our video. Remember, this lecture is a supplement to the course. Come to class for more in-depth and activity instruction on blues and gospel. You still need to be doing your readings and your content and your checklists in the course, so make sure you're not forgetting about that. If you have any questions, please call or email me. I'm here for you. No question is a bad question. It's what I'm here for, is to help guide you. Have a fabulous day, and let me know if you need anything, guys. Bye.